KC-12, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, it is 3 points. Left land, swim west, copy. 3 points. Crossing 2-1. Crossing at 2-4 is
Hello and welcome to the Blueskies podcast. I'm PR Ganapati, your host.
Just 70, roger, report type southeast, Greenwich, 4, midway, and view selected.
Today it's a great pleasure to interview Air Cmde NS Jamwal, who is an expert really on the Sukhoi 30, the early version, the K, as well as later the MKI. He was also the demo pilot for the Sukhoi 30. He commanded Sukhoi squadron, the first MKI squadron, and was a test pilot who spent extensive time in Russia preparing for the induction of the Sukhoi into the Indian Air Force. So we're really fortunate to have him here with us today and look forward to an exciting conversation about an aircraft that you all have been asking for. And so really look forward to this chat. Welcome to the program, sir. Thank you so much for speaking to me.
Thank you, Gana. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, sir. So, sir, we just love to first get to know our guests, their background. So where did you grow up and what was your motivation to join the Air Force? What was that initial journey like? Which aircraft did you fly? Any interesting anecdotes in your initial journey and training and things like that?
I was born and brought up in Jammu in a regular Indian household. And after my initial schooling there, I did class 6 to class 11 in Sainik School close by in Nagrota. That's about 10 kilometers outside Jammu. And followed by that, I joined NDA 62nd course. And thereafter, training in the Air Force Academy for Air Force flying training. We did our basic flying training on the ST2 in Bidar for 6 months. We were, I think, the last course or one of the last courses on that aircraft before the aircraft was phased out.
Right, got it.
Then 6 months of advanced training at Air Force Academy, Dundigal on Kiran Mark 1, which was a jet aircraft. And AFA those days was really a tough place to be in those days, with nearly more than 50% of our trainees getting grounded. So it was really hard to get the wings those days and get commissioned. After commissioning and getting wings, we did applied phase training for 6 months on Iskra at Hakimpet.
Okay.
And Iskra was a good precursor to the MiG-21 because of its similar instrumentation and feel of a single cockpit, as it was in the tandem seating.
Tandem seating as opposed to the Kiran, which is side by side. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So thereafter, we went for MOF2 training in Tezpur for a year to get day operational status on the Type 77 those days. And thereafter, my first operations squadron really was 32 Squadron in Jodhpur, where I spent about 3.5 years. And it actually was a good foundation for operational orientation.
Also flying the Type 77 or the 96?
No, it was MiG-21 Biz. MiG-21 Biz RM series. RM series standing for raw material series.
Okay, that is the indigenously manufactured in Ozar.
Yeah, these aircraft are made from raw material stage onwards at Nasik, Ozar. And the 32 Squadron was the first squadron to induct those aircraft. And it was flying Su-7s earlier. Su-7s were phased out, and then induction of MiG-21 Biz RM series started. And MiG-21, all-time favorite of many people.
Yes, it is amazing how Even, people like you, test pilots who've flown so many different types, when ghum fir ke, they all come back to my favorite was the MiG-21.
Absolutely,
Why, why
absolutely.
is that? Why is that, sir?
I really don't know, but you get some emotional attachment to the aircraft, I guess. And it is like it's like a big dart, you see, fitted with just wings and engine and a cockpit. You know, built for very high speed and high altitude interceptions by the Russians. But our Air Force, we used it in all the missions, like air defense, ground attack, even electronic warfare, for that matter.
Even electronic warfare, yeah, we spoke to Arjun Subramaniam about that, yeah.
Okay. And, we made it worthy of being called a versatile aircraft, much to the amazement of the Russians. And I think only Indians could have done it because we always working with the aim of extracting the maximum.
And then really apply our engineering capabilities to upgrading the aircraft, adding new
Yes.
systems from all over the world.
Yeah. And you see where we have taken it to. Today we have Bison flying with us, which is got contemporary equipment, avionics, radar, and weapons.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Tell us some anecdotes of that time. Who was your commanding officer there at that time in 32 Squadron?
Commanding officer was Wing Commander S.S. Tyagi, later Air
Oh my
Commodore.
God, legend, yeah, of the MiG-21.
He's got a world record of flying the maximum number of sorties on the MiG-21. He laid a great foundation for the squadron there and built up a very good team. Our squadron was a big family, very good interactions, operational orientation, and you know, social life was great. So it was a great place to be in that those days. And after the MiG-21 flying there in 32 Squadron, I was posted to 28 Squadron in Pune.
Oh wow, okay, my father's old squadron.
Oh, yeah. He was the Commodore Commandant there, I think.
That's right, yeah, correct. This was under Wing Commander Harish Masand at that time?
Wing Commander Harish Masan, yes. Later Air Marshal. And he was also the demo pilot on the MiG-29.
Yes, I watched it so many times. It's
Mhm.
amazing.
Mhm. So the MiG-29s had been recently inducted in 28th Squadron that time. This was the first squadron of the MiG-29s, besides, of course, the 47th Squadron also there in Pune. And MiG-29 was a quantum jump in terms of aircraft performance for us. In the MiG-21, you could start a turn with 9G, but not really sustain it. But on the MiG-29, you could sustain 9G turn for as long as you wanted because of its very high thrust to weight ratio and low wing loading and tremendous aerodynamics.
Really, everything depended on your physical fitness more than.
Such high performance really involved a new look at human physiological aspects and also aeromedical aspects.
Hmm.
And there is no fly-by-wire on the aircraft, but it could outmaneuver any of the Western fly-by-wire aircraft of its time. And I think you must remember that first public display at Farnborough Air Show in 1988 by Anatoly Kovachev, which amazed the West by the performance of the MiG-29. And of course, second time he did it in Paris 1989.
So talking about combat versus the fly-by-wire aircraft of the West, I'm presuming here you're talking MiG-29 versus Mirage in our fleet. And any interesting experiences doing DACT against the Mirage that you had in the MiG-29?
No, there was a very healthy competition between the Mirage squadrons and the MiG-29 squadrons. And
Right.
I wouldn't be able to really comment which one was better. But certainly there was a great, there was some edge which MiG-29 enjoyed in terms of maneuverability. And it was a great aircraft for close, it is a great aircraft for close combat as well as BVR combat. And with very potent missile systems and very highly maneuverable close combat missiles as well. In fact, it was MiG-29 which really brought in a dynamic shift in our air combat training with its beyond visual range missiles.
Okay. Uh-huh. And it was also the first with a helmet-mounted sight, isn't it, in our
Yes,
Air Force?
in our Air Force. This is the first monocle that you have mounted on the site. So it was not truly the helmet mounted sight on the helmet visor like we have it now. And after the MiG-29s, I went to do my flying instructor's course and did a short tenure at Hakimpet, followed by the test pilot's course.
Why did you decide to become a test pilot, sir? Because then you go down a different path in one's career, or possibility of a different path in one's career. What was your motivation or thinking?
Oh, yes, indeed. We were really oriented towards operational flying in the squadron those days, and not knowing much about the outside world. So, but your horizons do open up when you go out, especially for the flying instructor's course, and you get some exposure to the test pilot side also. And while I was doing the instructional tenure, our air headquarters had nominated some of us to appear for the test pilot selection. So we went through the process and got selected, and ultimately it worked a really good choice, good for learning experience in terms of knowledge, your thought process, your professional growth, and but most of all, I think the professional satisfaction.
What was the course like, sir, for you? And a lot of people talk about how it is the most grueling course that you can undertake, with a lot of theory as well as flying, different types of aircraft that you're unfamiliar with, report writing.
Oh yes, you took the word out of my mouth. It indeed is very grueling course, lasting for a year. But at the end, the satisfaction is immense. The fact that you fly multiple aircraft and you are required to be adaptable to flying different aircraft on the same day, for that matter. You may be flying a MiG-21 one moment, and then after 2 hours, you may be flying a Jaguar, and maybe after a few hours, an AN-32 or an Avro. And the report writing aspect, I think what you mentioned, during the course, you are handling three different reports at a given time. You are about to submit a report or finalizing a report, which you will submit for an exercise which you have completed some time back. There is one exercise that you are conducting at that given time and collating data and giving it some form of shape of a report. And the third one, which you are being briefed for. So throughout that 1 year, that is how the scenario goes.
And so, these aircraft are difficult enough to fly when you're flying them normally. But, in emergencies and whatnot, you have very little reaction time. But if you're flying a MiG-21 in the morning and a Jaguar in the afternoon, which have very different, systems and reactions to emergencies, how do you prepare for that? It's just, it seems quite amazing to me how you test pilots do it.
I agree with you, but that is what training does. That is what the training does to you, and also the selection process is such that you select people who are adaptable to flying different aircraft and be able to take the changes.
Great, sir. So after that, you, I presume, did a stint at the Flight Test Squadron and participated in trials and testing of various systems and things like that.
Oh yes, uh, the trials at AST were mostly with the DRDO produced equipment and armament trials. And I was involved mostly with the DRDO lab called ASIO, which later became DARE. And I was involved with their first radar warning receiver for the Air Force that is called Tranquil. And a major part of my AST tenure, I was involved with the Tranquil equipment, which later on led to Tarang.
Hmm. Which is the RWR that's now standard on the Tejas, I think, if I
Yeah,
remember
Tejas
correctly.
also and MKI also. And I remember Dr. Abdul Kalam visited us at ASIO and at AST to see for himself the progress of integration, because this was the first major electronic warfare equipment that was being used, that was being produced by the DRDO.
To the extent you can tell us what a RWR is and how does it work, it'll really help the audience get a sense for what that is.
Yeah, the radar warning receiver basically intercepts the signals from the has the antennas on the aircraft, which on all sides, and it gets whenever some radar is trying to track you, those signals are intercepted by those antennas and presented to you on the scope, and it tells you where the signal is coming from, and it also has the intelligence to understand the signal is signature of the signal, which means which aircraft is transmitting the signal or which ground radar is transmitting the signal. So this display in front of the screen will be about the aircraft that is trying to track you on the radar, or a ground radar which is trying to track the aircraft with the nomenclature. For example, a Mirage 2000, a MiG-21, because the RWR understands the signature of the transmission.
Right. Can it also tell what mode that radar is in? Like, I think.
Yes, yes. It tells you about the whether it is just about searching you or scanning in the scanning mode, or has it locked onto you.
Okay, so vital piece of equipment for situational awareness
Of
in the
course,
battlefield.
no doubt, no
Wow,
doubt.
lovely, amazing.
Visual to you for visualizing. Just 70, Roger, report time southeast, Greenwich, for the midway, and you will like this.
So, shall we shift gears to the Sukhois? When were you first, got involved with? I think we first just acquired directly Russian Sukhois, and then while the MKI was being built. So just tell us about the aircraft. What was why did we acquire it? What were the specifications that we provided? And then your journey into the world of the Sukhoi.
With the induction of Jaguar aircraft, Mirage 2000, and the MiG-29 in the 80s, nearly a decade back, the future plans of Indian Air Force in 1990s uh, were to induct a new air superiority fighter with multi-role capability. And the criteria that they worked on was to have a two-seater. This was to optimize operational effectiveness. Then a long-range aircraft with air-to-air refueling, because till that time we only had aircraft which did not have very long range and very short duration of flights, taking care of only point defense. Then also the ability to stay airborne for longer for area defense and for air dominance. Also to have electronic warfare capability, anti-shipping roles, and air-to-ground roles using precision guided weapons like the missiles and the bombs, and much more.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, an aircraft that is good at doing many things was the specific.
I think the dream machine. So, as usual, when you pitch for something, you always want your dreams to come true. So, this was something like a dream machine that we wanted. And I think possibly we got it also to a large extent in the shape of the Su-30MKI, which was to be inducted later in 2002. So, like I said, such aircraft actually did not exist that time. So, Indian Air Force and the Russians went into an agreement for designing this new aircraft, which we wanted. And it was decided that it should be based on the Sukhoi 27 airframe because of its fantastic aerodynamics and large internal fuel capability, besides, of course, the weapon capability. And we also wanted thrust vectoring of the engines for super maneuvers. And also, besides that, also a very powerful, robust radar, which the Russians actually had with them, and with the capability for air to air, air to surface, and pulse Doppler principle to pick up targets even in the ground clutter at very large ranges. And we also wanted all types of weapons with Western avionics and displays, not the Russians, because Russian avionics are not at par with the. While the Russian aerodynamics and engines are fantastic, but their avionics were not at par with the Western displays, Western avionics and displays. So we said that we should have a Russian airframe with the integration of Western avionics and displays. And any new aircraft development takes nearly a decade or so before it can be operationalized. And that is how, when this decision was made in 1995 or thereabouts, uh, the development process of the Su-30MKI started, and we could induct the MKI later in phase manner, starting with the year 2002. But in the interim, we inducted Su-30Ks in 24 Squadron in 1997. And 8 of them, we got them in 1997, and then additional 10 we got 1.5 years later. And Su-30K was actually a two-seat version of Su-27 with conventional instrumentation, more or less like the MiG-29.
Okay. And and what was the thinking? So why did we go for that interim step, which we've never done with any other aircraft, is my recollection? But what was the thinking?
Because we did not have the aircraft of that class earlier. And it was a good step, it was good interim measure. It helped us to get used to the aircraft of that particular class. Also shifting gears from point defense mindset to air defense mindset.
Right. Can you explain the difference between those two? So what is point defense and area defense, and how are they different?
An aircraft which can last in the air for longer duration can also go farther and can take care of the air defense of a greater area. But an aircraft which has very little endurance cannot go very far. So it has to do point defense. For example, just for an airfield, you'll just stay airborne close to the airfield or on top of an airfield and defend against any of the intruders. But an aircraft with long range capability, long duration airborne time can be directed to go hundreds of kilometers away and cover an area of greater cover a greater area than an aircraft that can do only point defense. For example, MiG-21 would be called a point defense aircraft, and to a large extent, even MiG-29 for that matter. And Sukhoi 27 with a much larger range, with much more endurance, can be easily called an aircraft for area defense. And it was Su-30K, let me tell you, was actually a very good precursor to the induction of a highly sophisticated Su-30MKI, which we were to get later.
Mm. So, the one of the things that were different about this was the two pilot. So, I can understand, because of mission complexity, so many hard points, different types of weapons that the aircraft carries, the workload would have been really very high if it had been a single pilot operation. But I'm sure it meant doing a lot of things to just improve CRM in the cockpit, and better coordination between the two, so that you can operate effectively as a crew. So, what was done in that field?
Indeed, the crew coordination is the most important thing is when you get more than one pilot in the cockpit. And you have to have both of them working in tune with each other so that the utilization of the aircraft is to the best possible extent. And that is the aim of getting those two people in the cockpit. Now, for that matter, training is very important. So, if you train well, you achieve good results. And I think right in the beginning, I think the training was such that we had just no issues, and the entire process was smooth and seamless. In fact, we also got uh, with more number of cockpits, you also had to have more number of operators, the crew. And if you have two pilots per aircraft, then you have to have double the number of pilots in every squadron. We decided to get the WSOs, the navigators, who would operate as the WSOs in the rear seat. And that also worked out very well right from the beginning. It's not that we started that much too late. We started immediately on induction of within I think a year or the second year of induction of Su-30K. we started inducting the navigators as WSOs.
Okay. And, they were coming probably from AN-32 IL-76, fleet, where the speed, the pace of change is much different from a, fighter aircraft in a combat situation. Do they adjust easily to the demands of the fighter environment and, the employment of weapons and things like that?
Absolutely right, Gana. This is a very important question because people who've been flying on AN-32s or Avros or any other transport aircraft suddenly getting a jump onto a high-speed supersonic aircraft with the ability to hold up to 9G in a sustained turn. It was a very challenging task and a tall order. But I must tell you that none of them who came to the fleet, they let us down. Each one of them coped up very well, even physiologically. One part is physiological aspect. They coped up physiologically very well, but also contributed immensely in the operational roles and squadron working. So that was a great thing to achieve.
Very nice. So tell me about the training. So was the training in the USSR, was it, or in Russia, or was it in India, or combination of the two? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, the Su-30K training we did in 1997 in Russia, and I was part of the 10 pilots team that went to Moscow in January of 1997. I was number 5 in seniority that time. So we did 1 month of ground training in Moscow in 1997 January, and thereafter 3 months of flying training at Zhukovsky Flight Test Center. This is about an hour and a half drive from Moscow. And besides that, we also did, the four of us also did the armament training. And I was also nominated to do some aerobatics training with Viktor Bogachev, of
Oh,
the
wow,
Cobra
really?
fame.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the famous Cobra guy. Yeah,
Yes, yes, yes.
amazing. You have to tell me in detail how that was.
we Thereafter we returned on I think 27th of April. I was posted at Adampur. From Adampur, I had to move lock, stock, and barrel to Pune with family. Uh, Reached there by 30th of April, and within the next 10 days, there was the induction ceremony planned for Su-30K with the Prime Minister Gujarat as the chief guest, and that is where I performed my first public display on Su-30K, and with only 20 hours on type.
Oh boy. And the aircraft were ferried by you all, or did they come
No,
crated, or how?
they were shipped by air. Yeah, they were created
Mm,
and shipped to us.
mhm.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me about the experience with Pugushev. What was he like, and what are the maneuvers he taught you? And
With Pugachev, I learned to do the tail slide, the Cobra on the
wow.
Su-30K.
Uh-huh.
So in the Cobra maneuver, what one does is that you go from upright position, and within about a second or two, you are about 120 degrees from 123 degrees from the upright position. That is about 30 degrees past vertical, and then you come back to the original position without losing any height or gaining any height. And engines take a lot of load for this, but they are so robust they remain stable all through. And Pugachev was the boss of Sukhoi Design Bureau those days. Boss means he was the chief test pilot of the Sukhoi Design Bureau, and always smiling, but very purposeful, and you could see the aura around him, aura of authority and the position.
Now, during the Sukhoi, during the Cobra maneuver, what are you experiencing in terms of G? Is it positive G, negative G? How intense is that? The forces, G forces acting on you?
G forces are not very significant, Gana, because it is done at not very high speeds. But
Okay.
yes, the rate of change in the vertical is quite fast, and that is what something you have to get used to. But I guess all trained fighter pilots will be able to go through that very with great ease. because it comes naturally to them then.
Right. Got it.
Visual, visual, before visualizing. Just need 70, like your report time southeast, connection, for the midway, and you selected.
Great, sir. So tell us about what was the demo that you had planned out for that inauguration, or what was the demo that you did in general for the Sukhoi 30, because you were the designated demo pilot? What sorts of maneuvers that you demonstrated? And I know once the MKI came in, you had more capability because of the thrust vectoring and things like that. But just love to hear about demonstrating this aircraft.
Su-30K demonstration was a regular display of any other conventional aircraft that one did with the uh, high G turns and inverted pass. I also used to do knife edge and looping maneuvers, low speed runs, low speed turns, vertical charlies, and but Su-30 MKI was a different ball game altogether. The induction display of Su-30K in 97 was about 7 minutes. But subsequently, on the Air Force Day in 1997 itself, we had to do a truncated display to fit into the timings, time slot given to us, and the closed box of space that we were to use. And that was at Palam. There, we did a high G turn followed by a looping maneuver. It was done in a race course pattern. So it was a high G turn and a looping maneuver, then a positioning turn, again at very high G, about 6G, and inverting the aircraft from that 6G turn. Then exiting out in front of the dares at doing a vertical Charlie. And when the commentator announced that the aircraft is going to do the inverted run, most of the spectators thought that it would not be possible, as the aircraft would first get wings level and then invert, because they thought there was not enough space for doing that. But when they saw the aircraft inverting from a 6G turn without getting wings level, they were enthralled. And, as they say, that a good air display should enthrall the general public, impress the professionals, and scare no one.
Right.
So we achieved that as we had trained for it, really.
That's a wonderful line. I'm going to write that down.
Yes.
Super.
So we're talking about the design of the profile on Su-30MKI. Right in the beginning, we decided to design a very composite maneuver that would showcase the super maneuver capability of the Su-30MKI. So we designed the loop, tumble, yaw.
Whoa.
So you start with a conventional loop from upright position, and halfway through, when you are on the back, you use the thrust vectoring in vertical and tumble to come back upright. That is, you rotate the nose through 180 degrees in the vertical in a very small radius.
My goodness.
Yeah. And on completion of that, you use thrust vectoring in the lateral plane to yaw the aircraft in wings level flight through 180 degrees in nearly zero radius.
Whoa.
And this loop, tumble, yaw remains the signature maneuver of Indian Su-30 MKI in all its displays, even today.
Amazing. I will provide the audience with a YouTube link so that they can see it for themselves. But it sounds like an absolutely mind-blowing maneuver.
Yes. And I remember there's one anecdote I could mention about. During the Aero India show, I remember the MiG-29 SMT test pilot of MiG Design Bureau. He went to the organizers and said that give me a slot before him, because after his display, no one watches. So it was very good to hear that.
So you operated the 30K, in the Air Force, built up the tactics and whatnot. So any interesting anecdotes from that time where you kind of surprised the other aircraft in our fleet with some of your capabilities?
Su-30K, of course, had immense long range capability, beyond visual range capabilities. But yes, on the Su-30MKI, we were able to surprise some of our other squadrons flying different aircraft during dissimilar air combat. And we could use our super maneuver capability to achieve advantage over them. And this was not only a good validation for all of us flying the Su-30 MKI, but also a learning experience for others that this kind of a capability actually existed.
And tell us the major differences between the K and the MKI. What were the things that we'd asked for that they built into it? I know you did mention super maneuvering capability. What is that? How does it achieved? And also, you were talking about avionics, Western systems being integrated. So just love to speak about the differences between the two.
So Su-30K was based on a Su-27 design.
Right.
So Su-27 design was Su-27 was designed in 1975 and came into operational service somewhere in mid-80s with the Russian Air Force, and it was I think the one of the best platforms in terms of aerodynamic efficiency and the kind of maneuver capability it gave to the aircraft. As a result, the Sukhoi Design Bureau has based all the subsequent aircraft on that basic platform. If you see the shape of all their aircraft is all similar to that basic
Very
platform.
similar, yeah.
Yeah. So we thought that we should have the same platform, which means the airframe will remain the same. We wanted the engines which would also have thrust reacting. So new engines compared to what the Su-30K had. Then with thrust reacting nozzles. Also, we wanted to have Russian radar itself because Russian radar was very powerful, though it was different from the Su-30K, but the Russian radar nevertheless, NO011 was on Su-30MKI. Then, besides this, we integrated the displays, the MFDs, multifunction displays of the front cockpit and the rear cockpit from the west. The navigation system, ring laser gyros with the GPS amalgamation with that, once again from the west. Head-up display was also taken from the west, and weaponry was from Russia. And all the air-to-air missiles, air-to-ground, anti-shipping, anti-radiation, they were all taken from Russia. But the maneuver capability of the aircraft that was so good that I think aerodynamics of the Russians are top-notch. And West may take a long time very, very long time to catch up with that. However, they lack in terms of avionics as compared to the West. And the super maneuver capability was possible because of the thrust vectoring. Of course, the aerodynamic design of the aircraft, number one. And number two, the thrust vectoring capability. And it's a very simple kind of design. You have the nozzles moving vertically up and down. Yeah, it's not very complicated, very simple design. Nozzles only move vertically up and down. That's all. But by combination of the movements, you get either you do maneuver in the vertical or in the yawing plane using differential thrust.
Okay, aha. And the computer is doing all that, or do you have some controls to operate those nozzles?
You operate that from the aircraft using your stick on which you have a switch mounted. And based on your inputs on the stick, you get either a similar movement on the thrust vectoring nozzles or differential movement.
Right. Okay, got it. Now, so the paradigm is shifting from the dogfighting within visual range, short range missiles, guns, things like that, to BVR. But And I think that, the West has taken the view that within visual range combat is a thing of the past, highly unlikely to happen. But, frankly, in low intensity conflicts or conflicts within the subcontinent, your rules of engagement may require you to visually identify the enemy before you can engage and things like that. So, how should one think about these two paradigms of WVR and BVR, and how is the Sukhoi is good at both. It seems to have powerful radar and missiles for BVR, but also this incredible maneuverability for within visual range. So it seems to be really well suited for either situation that we might face. How should we be thinking about this, particularly in the types of conflicts and rules of engagement we might have in the subcontinent?
Oh, that's a long question. And
Yes, it is.
Gana, your knowledge of military aviation is amazing,
Nice, sir.
I
I'm
must say.
just a Wikipedia guy.
Indeed, initially the Americans had taken out the gun from the aircraft when they came in after the World War, and they had to reintroduce the gun later because they thought the gun combat will not be there. But you may still get a chance where you get into gun combat. Not only those days, but even today. So, in the same way, while most of the combat will be beyond visual range, but there could just be a situation where you get into a situation where you are in close ranges in eyeball to eyeball contact, or maybe for close combat missiles ranges, and you have to use them. If you don't have those weapons, you will not be able to. So you have to have the capability and not lose a chance. So that's why even today, guns are still there. If the guns are still there, then surely the close combat missiles also should be there. And of course, the main combat will be in beyond visual range, no doubt about it.
Super. Tell us about some of the other interesting aspects, which again I think were a first for our Air Force, which is things like data link and you know talking to both the ground-based radars, AWACS, as well as other aircraft in the package, and some of those capabilities, which were pretty interesting.
Su-30MKI, while Su-30MKI also has this capability, but Su-30K also had this kind of capability. It could function as a command post with its data link capability. So you can have data link capability between your formation, from 3 to 4 formations flying in that particular area or an extended area, along also with the refueling aircraft and with the AVACs. And in a very small way, Su-30 itself, MKI, who is designated as a team leader, can become the command post for the other aircraft in his own formation package. Or there could be 3 to 4 formations flying in the same area or extended area. And he could become the command post for the entire package of good about 15 to 16 aircraft.
Amazing.
Visual before graduate. 70, Roger, report time southeast, connection, for the midway, and field selected.
So this multi-role, these capabilities truly are force multipliers, because it sounds like one aircraft can do so much with its 11 odd hard points and this long capability, 2 pilots, all of this intelligence that is available to it. Um, love to hear your experiences of really exploiting that force multiplier.
Basically, when you get multi-role capability on any aircraft, you have to make some compromises, because if you have only optimized capability in one area, then you can totally concentrate on that. But if you want good capabilities in every other thing, then you have to make compromises in some other. But on Su-30K, MKI, I must say, it does not seem there are any compromises really. The aircraft can do fantastic air-to-air role, offensive air roles really, not just defensive air roles, offensive air roles, then air to ground, air to surface, anti-shipping, that is, yeah, all kinds of roles you can do, electronic warfare. So, for example, suppose in the Gulf War, you had about 4 F-16s going to bomb a target. You put 2 tight escorts with them who will take care of the air defense, who stay with them all along. along with some electronic warfare escorts who would also be either with them or somewhere in the area. Then you will have some free escorts, maybe 2 to 3 formations, who will be taking care of the area, not not tied with the formation, but loosely around in the area somewhere. Then you will have the refuelers, electronic warfare, uh, AVAX aircraft. So a typical package of about 16 to 20 aircraft would go just to make sure that 4 aircraft drop their weapons at the target.
Right.
Now today, the same job can be done just by Su-30MKI, 4 of them.
Fascinating. Wow.
So that is what the true force multiplier is.
Right. So they can sanitize the area, they can suppress enemy air defenses, they can hit the target, they can jam, they can do all of that and come back. Amazing. Wow.
Absolutely right.
So, the Sukhoi 30 MKI has been used quite often in our exercises with foreign forces and things like that. And have you participated in any of those, or any interesting stories that you can tell us from those, from when we participate in those exercises, how we've performed?
During my tenure as the commanding officer, uh, this was a initial stage of first 2 years where everything was very sensitive, and we did not want to expose our aircraft to the foreign air forces. And though we were planned once to operate with the U.S. Air Force, but it was called off at the later stage. But in 2003, we were called to USA to carry out an air display because that was celebrations of centenary of aviation. But somehow that also had to be cancelled due to some bureaucratic issues.
Mm-hmm. Got it. But have you heard of, subsequently how they've performed? I know
Oh
they
yes,
have gone to various.
our fleets have performed very well, and it was appreciated by the other forces also, whether it was U.S. Air Force or the British or the Royal Air Force, or the French Air Force for the matter. Even Singapore Air Force has flown with us, and they admire the professionalism of our crews and also the way that we use our aircraft. Actually, Su-30 MKI was designed just for us. It did not even fly in the Russian Air Force. So we were the ones to start exploiting the aircraft in the absolutely most efficient way and effective way, for which SOPs had to be made, your procedures had to be made, your tactics, even the refueling capabilities were new. So we had to develop on that also.
And you did some fair amount of work in that. So tell us about that piece.
Uh, when we were the Su-30 MKI was not uh, the trials, the certification trials of Su-30 MKI in refueling were not done in Russia. So ATO refueling trials, since they were not conducted at Russia, they were pending. So the Russians requested our Air Force to conduct those trials here. They sent the refueler here. So I was co-opted to do this work, and we did that in Pune. Then we also got the chief test pilot from AST who was sitting in my back seat as an observer. So I did the trials by day initially, then by night, and they took all the data and got it cleared from their certification agencies there in Russia.
Very nice. And even the Mirages and the Jaguars didn't have air-to-air refueling at that time, is it?
I think amongst the fighters, we were the Sukhoi 30 MKI was the first aircraft to conduct the refueling.
Great, sir. I want to wrap up with the MKI demo. I know you've flown many VIPs in the aircraft. What are some of those experiences like?
Uh, yes, I did fly the Raksha Mantri that time, Mr. George Fernandez. He did fly with me. In fact, when uh, he was the chief guest at the Aero India Show 2003 at Yalanka. So as I finished my display at Yalanka, the ATC told me that Raksha Mantri wants to meet you. So I immediately took off my G suit after that and went to meet him. And he said, I want to I want to fly with you on this aircraft. But your chief says chief is dissuading me from it. So I told him, I said, but you have to get him on your side to fly. So, but yes, later on he came next. I think in September 2003 he came to Pune with all the necessary requirements, and he flew his flight with me there.
Amazing. So, just love to get your concluding remarks, with your wealth of experience, your assessment of this awesome machine. Today, with over 200 aircraft, is truly, the backbone of the Indian Air Force's offensive and defensive capabilities. But just love to hear your overall concluding assessment of the role it has played and continues to play in our Air Force.
With the induction of Su-30MKI, there was a paradigm shift in our thinking on how we use our aircraft and our tactical thinking changing into strategic aspects. The way we conduct our missions, we started doing a whole lot of offensive missions. Earlier, you actually probably flew at low levels and hiding yourself from the radars. But now you didn't have to do it. You could do offensive missions and invite the enemy to come and fight with you.
Right.
So there was an entire change of mindset, very offensive mindset. So I must say there is a shift that Su-30MKI brought in, and it continues, and it is developing even further. And with the induction of new aircraft, I think our air power is going to be used very effectively in terms of offensive work, besides, of course, defending our skies. So that is how Su-30 comes in.
Truly amazing. Wonderful. So I want to thank you for your service, firstly, but also to thank you for taking so much time to speak to me and to answer all my very basic questions with such clarity and such detail. I'm really very grateful to you, as is the audience.
Thank you, Gana. Thank you so much.
Visual to Fort Ridgeway. Just 70, Roger, report time southeast, connection, speed for midway, and yield selected.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapati.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends, give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app, and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.